Hey everyone, I'm your host Cadence, and welcome back to another episode of Project Honesty, a podcast designed for young adults, by a young adult, to gain brutally honest, friend-like advice, as well as provide a platform for young adults to form opinions, call outside of the lines, take deep dives into current events, and most importantly, have fun. This is Project Honesty, navigating reality with real conversations and diverse opinions. Happy National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. If you're in Canada, you can head over to Project Honesty's Instagram, which is project_honesty24, if you want to see more information about this day, an orange shirt day, things like that. So head over to Instagram. If you haven't already seen last week's episode called Bulletproof Future, Gun Control Conversations, schools should be safe. School should be a place to learn and grow. Schools should not become graveyards. The rules and regulations around guns in the United States is not keeping the next generation safe. In this episode, I compare the processes of owning a gun in the United States versus Canada, why the US needs tighter gun control, pivotal school shootings that have changed the way we view firearms in the States, and how schools should be a gun violence-free place. That is available on Spotify and YouTube. Today's topic, I've actually switched some things around so that I can make this kind of, not really a series, but today's topic is about the United States presidential debate. I want to go through what was said, what was wrong, and the takeaways, my personal takeaways from this debate. So I structured this and I dissected this debate by taking notes throughout. So kind of like this episode is more of the notes that I gathered throughout watching the debate. It was about like a little bit less than 2 hours. And so this is kind of just going through my thoughts as the debate went on. And then at the end, I'm just going to go through some things where I was like, this didn't really make sense. And then at the end, I'll explain kind of what I'm doing in next week's episode that bounces off this topic of the presidential debate. Jumping right into it, already from the top of the debate, you can physically see who is more confident and respectful. Kamala Harris, the Democratic Party, what would you call it, nominee, whatever, head of the Democratic Party, is the first one to initiate this very formal but almost awkward handshake with Donald Trump, the head of the Republican Party, and they exchange few words. They said, let's just have a good debate. And you can not really hear what Trump's response to that was, but that's not necessarily important. So one of the first topics brought up in this debate was the economy and the cost of living. Harris got to go first, and she mentions her experience of being brought up in the middle class in America. She talks about her plans to empower the middle class and the lower class and the working class in the United States in creating what she calls an opportunity economy, an economy that provides all Americans with the chance and opportunity to chase their dreams. She also discussed how her government is going to introduce tax cuts for younger families so that their living is more affordable. She also announced her introduction of a $50,000 tax cut to start up small businesses instead of giving multi-million and billion-dollar corporations tax cuts like Trump has done in the past, because she really, throughout this debate, this is not the only time she mentions how powerful small businesses can be in relation to the American economy, but she explains how this $50,000 tax cut is really going to make an improvement to the American economy by boosting these small businesses and giving them that easy startup that will eventually lead them to more prosperous things. She also talks about Trump's sales tax, how his plan is to put a 20% tax on everyday necessities. Speaking of Trump, he starts out talking about the economy and the cost of living. His response to this isn't even talking about America. He starts off by discussing tariffs in China and the tariffs that China has, and uses those tariffs as an example of how they protect China's economy. But in this context, it really makes no sense because he's not directly addressing the problem with the United States economy. And right out the gate, he accused Kamala of making a false statement, which didn't turn out to be false. He goes on to talk about how millions of people pour into America from jails and mental institutions and how they're taking all the jobs that are all currently occupied by African American people and Hispanic people. Multiple fact checkers, I think the 10 articles that I looked at that fact checked that statement all said it was false. there is not tens of millions of people that Trump claims pouring into America taking jobs. And when he said that statement, specifically when he was referring to the race of the people that are occupying jobs, he sounded very dismissive and argumentative and angry that people of color were able to get jobs. Kamala's face, even during that statement, was very like, what the fuck? So that was a very bold statement from him that actually turned out to be false. He is referring to these people, the tens of millions of people that he claims are pouring into America, as intruders, saying that they're taking over whole towns and using violence to do it, which, again, fact checker said simply isn't happening. Keep in mind, he's supposed to be talking about the economy here, and he's not. He's saying that these people are dangerous as a whole. He goes on to talk about criminal statistics, and then kind of rounds his answer with saying that deportation is the only solution to this, but he never directly relates it to the economic state of America, which was very like, why? It felt very unnecessary. This was his response about the economy. His answer had nothing to do with the economy. So in contrast, Harris brought up taxes and socioeconomic statuses and how she's going to help the American people. Trump simply did not. Even the commentator said at the end of Trump's response that immigration will eventually be a topic in this debate, trying to redirect his answer because it had nothing to do with the question around economy and cost of living. Kamala's response overall was put together. She was saying that her government has continuously had to clean up Trump's messes since his presidency. She made a false claim by saying that the unemployment rate was the greatest it has been since the Great Depression under Trump's presidency. That was a false claim. But also in this statement, this was the first time in this debate where the extreme project 2025 was mentioned. After Kamala mentioned this, Trump immediately denied his involvement in the project, stating that it was just some bullshit, basically, that was floating around Reddit. He also says he hasn't gotten enough credit for what he's done for the American people. Kamala's face during that was also like, what? Kamala then goes on to call him out again for his lack of plans that benefit the majority of American people, not just the rich upper class. Because what Trump tends to do is give tax cuts to the 1% of Americans that are making millions of dollars per year, that are definitely not struggling at all when it comes to their finances. And he tends to leave the lower class or even the middle class out of the conversation because he doesn't want to recognize that that is a problem in America, which is something Kamala used as a strong argument in this debate when it came to the economy. Trump then went back and said that Kamala has no different plans than Biden would have had, which is not true. That was another false claim that he made. Kamala has changed plans since taking over for former President Joe Biden. Trump also denies his idea of having tariffs of up to 20%. And he said that these tariffs wouldn't affect American people in the slightest, saying it would only affect other countries. His prime example for this point was obviously China. He tends to use China and Russia as an example in most of his statements. And this is also where we hear the name calling number one. Now, I didn't get to write all of them down because there would be 700 pages of names that he called Kamala. But this first one is he called Kamala a Marxist, so supporters of political and economic theories, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. That isn't true. Kamala denied that point immediately, obviously. And he also called her whole family Marxist, which was a very bold statement for him to make kind of right out the gate of this debate. We're still on the topic, or at least trying to stay on the topic of the US economy, and Trump yet again circles back to his opinions of immigrants, which in this context, again, has nothing to do with the topic of economy and the prices for living in America and what the American people are paying. And he's blaming democratic immigration policies for being the the single-handed reason for problems with the US economy. That was also debunked. And his tone throughout the entirety of this debate is strictly accusatory. He is not using facts, and he tends to not address the problem at hand. He kind of avoids it and goes on little tangents that honestly have no relation to the topic asked by the moderators, which is a problem. So the next topic that was brought up is abortion. Obviously, this is a hot topic everywhere, but especially in America right now. Trump is the self-proclaimed most pro-life president in American history, and in the debate, he said that he's proud of that. Trump states that the Democratic view on abortion is radical. He obviously, again, starts throwing shade at Joe Biden for what Trump says is the worst presidency in American history, and he actually repeats this statement. I didn't write it down every time, but I believe he said it probably 5 times. Then Trump throws out his first wild claim that it's legal to kill a baby after it's born. So he says that under democratic government, it is okay and legal to abort a baby outside of the womb. The moderator corrects him by saying you cannot kill a baby once it's born, which you would think that would be common knowledge for a guy who claims to be this intelligent, smart, all-knowing whatever. And so that was one of the first wild cards he threw out there. Obviously that was kind of a laughing point, because if you're killing something outside of the womb, or I say quote unquote killing, that would be murder. He doesn't directly refer to it as that because he probably can't think that fast, but he said that, and the moderator stepped in, and I thought that moment was quite hilarious. When it was Kamala's turn to talk, she begins to dissect why Roe v. Wade was heavily influenced by Trump's government and the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And she breaks this down because she points out the fact that he selected 3 of the justices on the Supreme Court, by hand. It was solely his decision, and she explains Trump abortion bans, so where in some states this essential health care is criminal with no exceptions for things like rape. During her time talking about this issue of abortion, she is clearly frustrated, and as a woman I felt that for her, because with what Trump's government has done to the protections of Roe v. Wade, it makes abortion basically inaccessible for women in America. And so she firmly states that under her government, the United States government will have nothing to do with what decisions a woman makes about her body and her health care. After this very strong argument that Kamala made, and I felt a lot of emotion during that point in this debate, Trump also throws a dig at Kamala, saying that she's a liar. He uses that word a lot. That she'll never get the Senate vote or the House vote. And during this very important conversation about abortion that should have been taken more seriously, Trump starts comparing the overturning of Roe v. Wade to student loans, and he refuses to directly answer the question from one of the moderators around whether or not he would sign a national abortion ban if he became president. And the reason that question was brought up was because the moderator asked if he would support the decision of his former vice president, Mike Pence, because Mike Pence supported a veto of a national abortion ban, and Trump doesn't directly answer that question. He's very avoidant when it came to the topic of abortion and abortion bans under his government. And he continues to throw digs at Kamala and is still comparing the situation to student loans and then he goes into this topic of how the Democratic government decided to handle student loans. And he keeps saying that, and he keeps saying that he doesn't even have to address or talk about abortion because it's not important. I'm not an American woman, but I am a woman, and hearing someone say that who has the potential to be in office is very concerning. The fact that a potential president and a former president says that this issue of abortion, which is important to talk about, isn't important, and a conversation around the laws about abortion and what we need to do as a people to make abortion safe, he just doesn't want to address it. And that, to me, is a really, really big problem. If you're a political leader, you should be prepared to address any problem brought to you, because that is your job when you're in office, is to address the problems that the people in your country have and then fix those problems. And he simply just doesn't do that because he doesn't even address the problem. Moving into immigration, this topic was a big one, and obviously this is Trump's favorite thing to talk about, because, you know Trump. But Kamala starts off by saying and showing her support for heavier border protection, and she uses the importation of illegal fentanyl as one of the examples of why borders should be more secure. She points out the fact that a lot of American families are impacted by fentanyl and says that if there was stronger protection at the border, not as much fentanyl would be entering the United States illegally. Then when it's Trump's turn to talk, he claims that immigrants are eating dogs and cats and other house pets. That is a viral clip that's been all over the internet. I bet you've seen it at this point. And if you haven't, hi, welcome back from being under a rock. That claim, that wild claim, was quickly shut down by one of the moderators because of it being a false claim. The moderator was like, well, we've talked to the police in that town. I think it was Springfield or something. And the moderator fact-checked him right there on the spot and pointed out that that was a very false claim for him to be making. And then Trump goes on to say that under Kamala's government and under her immigration policies, that the United States will be like Venezuela on steroids. Kamala swiftly defends her point by bringing up the obvious fact that Trump has been declared a threat to national security on multiple occasions by former employees in high-level government, by his employees specifically. She also points out how Trump has not focused on addressing the problems and the concerns of the American people, and just really puts a spotlight on his general lack of care for Americans. The moderator at this point brings Trump back down to earth, and he kind of asks, the moderator indirectly or directly but phrased a different way, asks how he thinks he is going to deport what he thinks is over 11 million illegal immigrants. So then Trump goes on this spiel about how all immigrants are criminals and how it's all Kamala's fault that they're in the United States. Then he goes on to say that claims Kamala has made about immigration are fraudulent, another favorite word of Trump. Trump claims that America has one of the highest crime rates in the world and that crime is skyrocketing and consistently going up. But again, the moderator quickly steps in and corrects him by pointing out the fact that the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the States, says that the crime rate nationally has been going down. He rebuttals this by saying that the FBI is incorrect and that they're a fraud. Yep, I bet one of the largest security bureaus in the United States is a fraud. All right, Trump. All right, you think that. After this, Kamala makes a funny point, but a serious point, and digs into him by saying and pointing out the fact that he has committed multiple crimes, economic crimes, political crimes, national security crimes, and that he's actually been prosecuted for these things. Overall, when discussing any topic, Kamala always has a personal connection to it. She talks about this kind of around 40 minutes into the debate, around why she cares so much about every single little thing, and it's because of the personal connections she can make to everything. And then in the middle of talking about immigration, this was kind of the first little back and forth that the two had during this debate. Trump unexpectedly changes to the topic of transgender issues in America and says that, quote, Kamala Harris wants to provide transgender surgeries for illegal aliens in prison. That was not backed up. That fact is definitely not a fact, and the moderators kind of told him, hey, we're not on that topic yet. The moderator then asked Trump about the January 6th incident where Trump extremists decided to storm the Capitol after he told them to storm the Capitol, and he denied any involvement or influence in that incident, which is wild because the majority of people at that Capitol storming were Republican supporters and Republican extremists, and Trump sent out a tweet that day telling these people to come to the Capitol, and he denied all of that evidence, which is, you can't. Like, there's evidence backing up the fact that he had the majority of the involvement in that January 6th incident. Then, of course, he always is consistently bouncing around. He begins to blame Biden's government and just the Democratic Party as a whole for the ruined relationships between North Korea, Russia, and China, and how the United States no longer has a good relationship with those countries. Now, he then goes on to praise himself. He's saying that people called him the most feared president and the most powerful president. And again, he keeps throwing insults at Biden, calling him the weakest and the worst president in the United States. And again, he's not addressing how he's going to fix or heal the topic of immigration. He doesn't bring up his plans. The next topic that they discuss in this debate, another really hot topic right now in the United States and all over the world, is the Hamas-Israel conflict. Kamala started off by stating that Israel does have a right to defend itself, but should also be abiding by international humanitarian law, which, if you listen to the Palestine series on this episode, you would know that Israel has committed multiple international humanitarian law crimes. And so when they do defend themselves, they should also be finding a way to protect civilians, innocent civilians. She pointed out the fact that a lot of Palestinians have died because of this. But she supports the idea of the two-state solution to end this conflict between Israel and Palestine. Trump immediately doesn't want to talk about this issue in the current context. Rather, he states that if he was president, this would have never happened. He just doesn't want to address the issue at hand. He talks about how he's best friends with Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, saying that his relationship with Vladimir would have saved this conflict from even starting. He then says that Kamala hates Israel and that she doesn't want to meet the Israeli prime minister. He also says that under her presidency, Israel won't exist. And he also claims that Kamala hates all Arab people. Kamala is quick to point out the fact that Trump is easily manipulated. That's why he's friends with so many dictators, and why these dictators like Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin support Trump is because with the little flattering and favors that they do for him, Trump is happy and will basically let them do whatever the hell they want. But again, he's not addressing the problem of the Israel-Palestine conflict, unlike Kamala did, and he just is throwing insults left, right, center. Then, when they move on to the topic of the Ukraine-Russia war, Trump is asked how he would stop this war within 24 hours, which is a claim that he made, I believe, a few weeks ago, a couple months ago. Trump indirectly answers this by saying, basically, he says war is bad, which is a given in this situation. War is always bad. But he doesn't actually provide any solid solutions to resolve this conflict in the time period he said he would. He kind of just said, oh, I'll go have a conversation with him and then they'll be done and happy and whatever, which isn't true. He goes on to blame the Biden administration for the whole Russia-Ukraine war, as well as saying that they will be the main catalyst to World War III. Coming from someone who is, what Kamala says, is sending love letters to dictators, I don't think that someone who is not supporting these dictators is going to be the one to start World War III. I bet the one that is best friends with those dictators, so Trump, is going to be that catalyst for supposed World War III. Throughout this entire debate, Trump has referred to the Democrats as Biden's government, but Kamala, when discussing the topic of Ukraine-Russia war, corrects Trump, and she says, like, just letting you know that you're not running against Biden anymore. You're running against me, so talk about me. And then somehow, in the midst of talking about a war, the topic of Kamala's race came up after Trump brought up the comments questioning whether Kamala was actually black or not. Those comments came from Trump about a month and a little bit ago, I believe. And then in the debate, when asked about this, he says that he doesn't care what race she is, which is making an educated guess. He definitely cares. And he likes to mock her for her race. Then they moved on to the topic of healthcare. This one was was really interesting to watch this being talked about. Trump says that he has ideas for a plan and concepts for a plan, but not a solidified plan, because he excuses that by saying he's not president yet. If I was a political leader, I think I would try to make plans in advance, but I'm not, so I don't know. But he doesn't have a solidified plan on how he's going to fix the healthcare system crisis in America. Then he goes on to say that he saved Obamacare in the United States, and he says he made healthcare more affordable. That was also fact-checked and said was a false claim. That was a false claim. He didn't do that. Kamala discussed her conversations around both government-run healthcare and a mix of private insurance healthcare, which was a topic brought up between her and Bernie Sanders about a year ago. She states that healthcare should be a right and not a privilege in the United States, and that healthcare should be accessible and affordable to all American people. She also explained how she kept pharmaceutical prices down for seniors and families, which were lower prices than ever seen before in America. Trump didn't get to comment at the end of that statement. Moving on to climate change, which I kind of forgot was a thing that they put in here. So both candidates were asked the general big idea question of how they would fight climate change. Kamala didn't necessarily address this topic for the future. She kind of addressed what they're doing in the present. So she talked about how the Democratic government has already invested in eco-friendly energy projects and solar projects and things like that. But then when it was Trump's turn to answer, he used this very niche example, which was also fact-checked and reported as a false claim. But Trump then bashed that claim from Kamala and said that she wants to cheaply manufacture cars from China-owned factories in Mexico to be imported into the United States with no tariffs. And he didn't directly answer the question about how his government would fight climate change. He just didn't do it, which is a problem. He's not addressing the task at hand. Then in the closing statements, Kamala reinstated how she will invest in the American people and their hopes and their dreams for the future, how she's going to help women have rights to their bodies without government intervention, how she will help families live more affordably, and how she is going to put the American people first, which is something we see Kamala doing a lot in this debate, really making that point clear that she is there for American people and not necessarily for herself. At the start of Trump's closing statement, which is actually hilarious, I hope you go watch his closing statement because it's actually quite embarrassing for him. He started bashing everything that Kamala said in her statement, saying it was all false. He says that her government will actually do the things that the American people believe are right, and that she will never go through with any of the plans that she makes. He continues to bash Kamala, saying that she is the worst president and vice president in the history of America. Not once in his closing statement does he address the American people as a whole, or his plans to help the American people. This is not an uncommon thing for Trump to do throughout the entirety of this debate. Some of the general takeaways that I saw through this debate is, so both parties made false claims. You can go Google them. There's multiple articles about these false claims and where they are in the debate. And not surprisingly, Trump was the one making the majority of these false claims. Trump was very accusatory and heated, and what I would describe as unsteady during this debate. So I'm no debate expert, but his arguments and their tone overall were weak. Instead of explaining how he's going to help people, which is your job as a president, the majority of his answers were focused on how the world views America, how Biden sucks and is horrible, how Kamala is the worst vice president in U.S. history. And though I'm young, I know that you don't win an argument by being mad and throwing these wild accusations at your opponent, which is exactly what Trump did. It almost felt like an immature debate. But what can you say for an ugly old white man with too much money and a guy who is found guilty of 34 felony counts, including crimes around sexual assault and national security crimes? Just saying. Kamala, overall, I thought had very strong arguments. She had evidence to back up most of her claims. I mean, obviously, she still made false claims. The one thing that stood out to me the most about Kamala was that she was on topic 99% of the time. She answered questions asked by the moderators, she stayed on topic, and she focused on addressing the problems that have been brought to her by the American people and how she is going to fix them under her government. She rarely threw out accusations and did not focus on the reputation of her opponent and attacking that reputation, and instead focused on the task at hand, which is the debate. So overall, I felt Kamala's argument and presentation was a lot stronger. Next week's episode will be closely related to this one. You'll find out more when we release our topic post on Instagram, so stay tuned. And thank you so much for listening to another episode of Project Honesty. You can find Project Honesty on Spotify at Project Honesty or on YouTube at Project_Honesty. And to keep up to date with new episodes, you can head over to Project Honesty's Instagram, which is at Project_Honesty24. That is where we release our weekly topics. We also have a TikTok, which is project.honesty. And we also have a website. The link for that website is in our Instagram bio. And to help spread this podcast everywhere, tell a friend or share with family about Project Honesty, and you can direct them over to the Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, or website to help them learn more. Remember to subscribe, follow, and click the bell icon for updates when I post. And remember, the more listeners, the bigger the family.